Hello, welcome to PC Jack. This month, Noctua launched its latest addition to its lineup of 120mm coolers with the NH-D12L. It's like a baby NH-D15. So today we're going to take a look at the NH-D12 and see what kind of system it's aimed at, the ease of installation, performance, and more. So to start, the NH-D12L is a compact 120mm air cooler aimed at use in a small form factor setting or even in a 4U enclosure. Noctua advertises that this air cooler can achieve a level of efficiency that surpasses many full height 120mm models. We'll see if that claim holds out to be true later in the video. Open up the box, you get a box of accessories including all your mounting hardware, adapters, thermal paste, and all the other accessories you would expect from a Noctua cooler. And then you got the cooler itself. The NH-D12L comes in at 145mm in height and 760 grams in weight. The cooler also has an interesting jagged design which seems to assist with directing airflow through its aluminium fin array. With that height though, you can even fit this into an ITX case like the NR200, which is pretty impressive. The cooler makes use of an asymmetrical dual tower heatsink design with 5 soldered copper heat pipes and a revised version of the NF-A12X25R 120mm fan, with the option of adding a second fan at an additional cost. Basically the standard NF-A12X25 but with rounded edges to better fit the heatsink. Unsurprisingly, I was really impressed with the noise levels with this fan, as running at full speed barely peaked over 40 dBA, which is kind of what we've come to expect from Noctua's highly regarded NF-A12 fan. The NH-D12L offers full RAM clearance, however this does not include when using a second fan, so beware. Multiple sockets are supported, including AMD's AM4 socket as well as the upcoming AM5 socket, which is really cool to see. Also supported is Intel's latest LGA 1700 socket as well as LGA 1200 and more. The cooler uses Noctua's tried and true SecuFirm 2 mounting system, and as with most Noctua coolers, installation is really straightforward. For today's testing, I've installed the NH-D12L on my Alder Lake test bench, which uses an LGA 1700 socket. To install the cooler on an LGA 1700 socket, you'll need the included Intel backplate, 2 of these mounting brackets, 4 of these nuts, 4 of the blue spacers, 4 bolts, and 4 of these little plastic clips. The 4 bolts need to be positioned on the outer corners of the backplate and then use the plastic clips to lock the bolts into place. Once the backplate is positioned behind the motherboard, all 4 of the blue spacers are placed over the protruding screws, and then you can place the mounting brackets in either a vertical or horizontal orientation, depending on which way you're orienting the cooler. For LGA 1700, you need to thread the screws through the center of the hole labeled 2, and then use the nuts to lock the brackets into place. After applying thermal paste to your CPU, the heatsink is then lowered onto your IHS while lining up with the mounting brackets. The heatsink is then screwed into place, alternating sides 3 to 4 screw turns at a time to ensure even mounting pressure until the screws no longer turn. The included fan is then passed through the heatsink and attached using the fan clips and then plugged into your motherboard's CPU fan header. Overall, this installation process only takes a couple of minutes, which is something I'm really pleased about, as a lot of coolers can be an absolute headache to install, so major kudos to Noctua on that part. Now, onto performance. For today's testing, we'll be using my Alder Lake test bench, which features an Intel Core i5 12600K paired with the MSI Mag Z690 Tomahawk DDR4 Wi-Fi. I've tested the NH-D12L at 3 different power stages from around 100 watts all the way up to nearly 200 watts in order to fully gauge the overall performance of this cooler at various power states. For a full breakdown of my CPU cooler testing methodology, I published a video explaining the ins and outs of all of my CPU cooler testing, so make sure to check out the link in the video description. Using noise normalized thermals will allow us to gauge the performance when compared to some other Noctua coolers, including the NH-D15, the NH-U12A, and the NH-U12S Redux. I was particularly interested to test the NH-D12L against the NH-U12A and the NH-U12S Redux, as they're 2 of Noctua's most highly regarded 120mm air coolers, so I was really interested to see just how it stacks up compared to them. Starting with our 105 watt load testing, the NH-D12L manages to outperform the NH-U12S Redux by a slim margin at 58 degrees on average under load. Given this is our lowest power state, this is going to be the most indicative of a gaming load scenario unless you're heavily CPU bound in any specific titles, so this is fairly representative of the most basic load level. However, moving on to our 157 watt load testing, the NH-D12L takes a significant lead over the NH-U12S Redux with an average of 78C compared to 82C, while still trailing closely behind its larger older brothers, the NH-D15 and NH-U12A. Now on our 194 watt load testing, we see the NH-D12L rather impressively managing to maintain an average of 90C, which is very impressive given our 12600K is pushing nearly 200 watts, while leaving the NH-U12S Redux in the dust. Now of course, 90C is not exactly ideal under such a significant load, so it wouldn't be advisable to run this for sustained periods of time. But managing to stay at this temperature without edging even closer to TJ Maxx is certainly an accomplishment given the size of this cooler. All things considered, the NH-D12L is actually a really capable cooler given its size, but you may be wondering whether it's worth splurging the extra £29 to get the additional fan for even more performance. Now sadly, I don't think it is. Testing with a dual fan configuration under our 105 watt load test saw a very slight improvement by 1C down to 57C, which is still an improvement but arguably nothing substantial. Testing at 157 watts though saw identical results, with the NH-D12L having very little regard for an additional fan pushing air through its heatsink. Again, at 194 watts we see only a 1C improvement down to 89C from 90C, but with a slight degradation to our idle temperatures. Based on this, it's fairly difficult to actually recommend a second fan, as the cooler seems pretty content chugging along in a single fan configuration, so that could be worth bearing in mind in order to save a buck. Overall though, I'm really impressed with how much performance Noctua has managed to cram into such a small footprint. Now, I had no expectation that the NH-D12L would actually beat the NH-D15, but given that this cooler managed to handle a 12600K pushing nearly 200 watts, while the NH-D12S Redux was struggling, is something that's really impressive about this cooler given its size. Now, 90C is a little higher than what I would like to let this cooler sit at for sustained periods of time, but it's still impressive nonetheless to see just how versatile this cooler is. I could easily recommend this cooler for someone running a Ryzen 7 or i7 CPU, but if you want to pair this with a more power hungry CPU like the 5900X or 12900K, you're probably going to have a bad time and sacrifice performance. However, at a price of £90, it might be a bit of a tough pill to swallow when you can get a better performing cooler like the NH-D15 for near enough the same price, or sometimes even lower. Now, the size is obviously going to be an important factor in that buying decision, but only you can really decide if that is worth it for yourself. Additionally, a lot of people may be disappointed that there's no Chromax version of this cooler quite yet, so you are going to have to deal with the infamous beige brown Noctua colour scheme. Personally, this is probably one of my favourite coolers aimed at SFF enclosures, and I'd be really interested to see just how well it performs in my mini ITX rig. If you'd be interested to see that in a future video, then make sure to leave a comment to let me know. Also, let me know what you think of the NH-D12L and whether you're thinking about getting one for yourself. Also, thanks to Noctua for sending this out for a review, but if you'd like to learn more about this cooler, or even pick one up for yourself, I'll include links to those in the video description. If you enjoyed this video, then please feel free to like and subscribe for more videos on the way soon. If you're after more PCJack content, then make sure to check out my Twitch channel. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at PCJack94. If you'd like to talk more with myself and other like-minded hardware enthusiasts, then make sure to check out the PCJack Discord. If you'd like to support the channel even further though, then make sure to check out the PCJack Patreon, where you can claim exclusive benefits while helping to fund everything I do on the channel for you guys. You'll find links to all those in the video description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.